Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. Today we're joined by Bob Martin, whose remarkable journey spans from being a high-powered criminal lawyer during Miami's infamous cocaine cowboy era to a mindfulness coordinator, certified meditation mentor, and a published author. At 74, Bob draws from his extensive experiences as a criminal lawyer, restaurant owner, corporate consultant, and a community leader to help others discover clarity, resilience, and peace. Currently a professor of wellness and mindfulness coordinator at Elon University, Bob integrates Taoist teachings, brain science, and psychology into practical lessons for breaking free from limiting beliefs. His story of transformation offers powerful insights into living a meaningful life. Bob, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for your welcome. Thank you for allowing me to be here. And thank you for creating this wonderful platform.
Yeah, thank you. So in some of your bio notes, you talk in there about the relationship between meditation and weight loss. Can you talk to us about that? I'm kind of curious on that one.
Everything begins with your thoughts. You know, our sense of self-worth, our sense of the committee in our head and the messages we get. You know, the sense of I'm bored, I want something else. The sense of I don't like this guy, get him away from me. I mean, all of that starts with our thoughts. And when we become more skillful with our thinking, when we become more able to understand that we are not our thoughts. And I think that's kind of the key, is that we all tend to live our lives living out our truth, however that truth might express ourselves by the first thought that comes up when something happens. You know, you go out of a door at a mall and you see some young man walking with his pants halfway down around his butt and his underwear showing, and immediately you have thoughts and impressions, and you know all about who this guy is and what he's like and what he's going to sound like, and that's your truth. But it may be so far from the truth that there's not even a relationship between it. And so that's the way, you know, our normal everyday life is. And it is the same with your relationship with food. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I'm bored. I want something to eat. I'm going to open up the refrigerator door and stand in front of it and just look until I find something that attracts me. And I'm not happy with what I'm seeing, and I wish there was something else, and I want something sweet. I mean, blabbity, 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 blabbity. And if you are in your thoughts, and your thoughts are your truth, and they are who you are, you have no access to that. It's just going to happen. And when you have some access to it, and you realize that I'm not my thoughts, as in our everyday language, we say, I had a thought. Oh, hey, Doug, I had this thought. Hey, Doug, I had this idea. Well, if I had the idea, if I had the thought, that means I'm not the thought, and that it's something that I had. And who is the I that had it? And so those are the questions that we really work with in meditation. And so when you are not particularly hungry, but you go and stand in front of the refrigerator and you look at your thoughts and you are aware of them and you watch them and you have access to them, when you say, well, these are just silly thoughts because I'm not really hungry and there's nothing I really want. And if you can just give it a few seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and let the thoughts go on by, you know, then they're gone and you're on to something else, and you did not eat that Hershey's bar.
So yeah, so when you were saying that and you said, we're not our thoughts, and it just came to me straight away, well, who are we if we're not our thought? Because we all think we are our thoughts, and it's I guess it's who are we? And so you're suggesting there that meditation could potentially take us to a closer realm of who we are.
That is what meditation does. That is not, see, everybody thinks meditation's about quieting the mind, and it's about having an empty mind, or like white noise or some other concept. And the most common conversation I ever have when people find out I'm a meditation teacher is, oh yeah, I could really use that. I really need that because I'm all stressed out, but I could never do it because I tried to sit down once and my mind just went wild. And I had all these thoughts. And I'd like to metaphorically grab them by the shoulders. I go, no, 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 no. That's what's supposed to happen. You were meditating, you were doing it. You just thought that you weren't doing it. And but it's not about not having the thoughts or quieting the mind. It's about having a relationship with your thoughts. It's about stepping out of your thoughts and, as you just said, reconnecting with whoever that is the creator of your thoughts. I mean, if you look at it from a neuropsychology perspective, you might say that we have a database that produces, with all of the conditioning that we've had in our lives, that produces thoughts. If you're looking at it from an evolutionary psychology perspective, you might say that the brain is simply operating in its survival mode that it evolved into when we spent 1.7 million years as hunter-gatherers in the jungle. If you are more spiritual, you might say it's your soul.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So I guess very different perceptions at different stages of our awareness of what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that meditating, whether we do it once a year, once a month, once a week, once a day, is going to have an effect on how we view that, I guess. Yeah, for sure.
I would say how we develop that relationship. And, from what you just said, you have a neighbor down the street who you would like to know better, and you probably would like him if you got to know him. So if you spend every day with him for 5 minutes, you're going to have one kind of a relationship. If you see him once a month or twice a year, it's just going to be a very different relationship.
Yeah,
I remember
exactly.
asking my coach once, well, how often should I? He just said, more better.
Yeah, yeah. I was a lady that I've interviewed on this podcast a year or so ago. She put a post on social media last night, and she not long ago got back from a 10-day silent retreat.
Mm,
And I'm not sure where exactly, what organization it was with or anything, but she was describing it. And she said, for 10 days, and she's not typically a quiet person. She would, just be like the normal person who would struggle to keep quiet. But they had to sit, I think they meditated for an hour early in the morning, an hour at night, but for 10 hours through the middle of the day, they had to sit. They couldn't lay. They were all in the same room. They all had to sit for 10 hours with their eyes closed, not meditating, but just with their eyes closed, going through the experience of all of the thoughts in the mind. And all they had to
mm,
do for those 10 hours was feel what was happening in their body. They didn't,
mm-hmm.
that wasn't about meditation, and so you said something earlier there that reminded me of that. And it's that relationship of what's going on inside us and our, and she said her body was crying out. It was very uncomfortable to sit still for 10 hours. Her knees, her ankles, were screaming. And that was the idea, was And it's not for everybody, but
no,
yeah.
that's a pretty strict retreat. I have, I mean, I know that in Tibet they have retreats like that. I've never been to one here in the West. That's a pretty strict one. I don't know if I would make. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know if I would make it through a week of 10 hours of sitting.
Yeah. Well, this lady's quite. She decided many years ago to just say yes to everything. And she's jumped into so many things that she's just said yes to. And then she's like later found out, what are we doing? Like, what's it about? And she actually had the discipline to be the first person to row from Mexico, row a boat solo from Mexico to Australia.
Wow.
The first female in history to ever do it solo,
Wow.
non-stop, unassisted. And she had done the Atlantic prior to that, so she knew what she was getting in for with the Pacific. But yeah, she's done a lot of other things, and so yeah, she's used to being alone with her own thoughts for considerable amounts of time.
Good for her. Good for
Yeah,
her.
yeah. But yeah, like rowing the Pacific's not for everybody either.
No.
So, yeah. So the podcast's about helping men develop their intuition and helping them realize why it's a good idea to do that. So you don't need to convince me, but let's talk to the audience here about the relationship between meditation and intuition. Is there a relationship between them?
Well, yes. Yes, there certainly is. Because when you sit, I mean, sometimes, well, in the reason that I'm hesitating going back and forth is when I really think about intuition work, when I really think about how I worked and developed my intuition, it really wasn't through what you would call your typical secular or Buddhist meditation techniques. It was more Taoist techniques. And if you don't know too much about Taoism, it's one of the three sisters, I suppose, of Eastern thinking: Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. And it's kind of the hippy dippy version. It's kind of the go with the flow version of Buddhism. And it specifically teaches the development of the intuition, and specifically teaches how to connect that intuition to the verbal mind so that you can make the hunches that intuition is normally associated with into actual language, so that it becomes much more workable. Your rational mind, your verbal mind, is more utilitarian. Your intuition is more of a gentle reminder and coach. I've not been asked that question before, so I'm trying to work my way through it. But so it's kind of like that. In meditation, we certainly, we sit, and then we don't sit for the purpose of not having thoughts, but that is an effect that once we develop the basic skills, that take 2 or 3 weeks to get a hold of, we start noticing that there's more space between our thoughts. So in that space between our thoughts, there is an opportunity to begin to feel, touch, and play with our intuition.
Yeah, I've personally noticed, like when I'm not if I'm meditating and I'm not seeking anything, I'm not trying to find an answer to a problem or whatever. I just, on occasions, things come to me just out of nowhere without seeking anything, and I'm not suggesting that someone sits down and tries to sit down and not seek something and get some
Right, right.
because that won't work. That's very counterintuitive. It's at that moment when you're just not expecting anything, you're just hanging in there with meditation, that I'll have thoughts. Like, my podcast originally was called Conversations with Doug. During meditation one day, it just came to me, I needed to change the name of it slightly and call it Intuitive Conversations with Doug. And that was about a year into the podcast. And it was just like, oh, okay. Yeah, because I do talk about intuition, and that is my thing. And but I hadn't had the thought outside of that. So to me, it came, I had allowed myself to be at, for the sake of the word, and this might be a good description or not a good description, just for that time, I was at a frequency where I could receive that little bit of information.
Mm-hmm.
Has it changed the podcast? Has it made it different or better? I don't know. I haven't even tried to gauge that. I just changed the name of the podcast. I added that word to it. And I've had many things like that happen, but it doesn't happen every day. It's not like, it wouldn't happen 1 in 10 times I meditate, that's for sure. But it's just occasionally things seem to drop in. And I guess I put it down to, it was at a time I needed to know it, because benevolent forces somewhere decided Doug needs this bit of information. And I had got myself at a point, because there's some people, spiritual people, who just tap into stuff all the time, and I don't feel I'm one of them. I just feel,
Mm-hmm.
like it's few and far between that I get a heavy revelation come through, like it's not like a daily occurrence. And it's not like I want it to be. I'm happy with the frequency that things occur at. But yeah, I just guess in meditation, it's just one of the times that I'm receptive, and it's not the only time I'm receptive to things, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, when I think, I mean, if, thinking about your question, if I, here's a question back at you, kind of. The times when, this whole intuitive word, it's almost as if the word itself and the quality of it itself is purposefully lacking definition. I mean, when we're talking, what are we even talking about when we talk about intuition? And we do know what it's not. It's not doing math. We know that, But when I think about intuition, I kind of, it relates and connects in me as being around the things that give me the sense of awe, being around things that are beautiful, or feeling a sense of connection to the situation around me. Um, uh, I guess I think that's it, feeling connected to the situation around me, where I'm not, my ego, the I of I had a thought, kind of gets out of the way. And it's not even there. And like, but some people might think of intuition differently. They think of the hunches they get. Should I go left or should I go right? And I think going right, is this the right time? Is timing, the sense of timing, is that an intuitive process? So I guess, you stir in me a lot of questions about what intuition even is.
Good. I'm glad. And yeah, and as you're saying all that, I'm thinking, I've had this conversation many times before, and many people, well, what angle do you want to come at this from, Doug? Like, and I look at it very, very multifaceted. Like, I'm fascinated with the unseen realm, the things we can't touch and feel and go up to, and yet we can go up to a book and open it, and we can touch and feel it and see it. but it depends what page we open to, and it depends
Mhm.
which paragraph or line our eyes go to. That could be, that could just bring tears to our eyes when we read that one line.
Mhm.
And why did we open that book we can see, touch, and feel to that page that day? And why did we feel connected, like you just said, when we read that line?
Mhm.
And this could be a children's book, it could be Dr. Seuss, it could be the Bible, it could be any Eastern religions, like Confucius, or it could be anything of any level. But at that moment, you were connected to it. And if you went
Mhm.
back and asked why did that happen? To me, it's the unseen realm. Like,
Mhm. No, I
it's,
understand.
and what happens in the unseen realm? I don't know. I'm not about to suggest. Have I been there? I believe I have. Do I remember anything about it? Not right now. Nothing that I
Mm.
could tell you about it. I regularly, like when I say regularly, probably once every week or month, I listen to podcasts with people that have had near-death experiences. And I hear all these experiences and I think, I don't remember ever having anything like that happen. I've got nothing like that. And these people say it changed their life and they, for the better. And it was a terrible situation, but what they saw, they felt, they heard, they experienced made it better. And now they've moved on to this new path. And I'm thinking, I've never had those experiences, but the occasion when something does occur or happen, you know, through synchronicities, uh, I've had the most mind blowing, positive things happen in my life that people would just like dream of having. And but I think we all do have wonderful experiences. I just recognize them, and I do now recognize synchronicities a lot more than I used to because I've had such good experiences with them. I'm like tend to follow them a lot more. Like, okay, good, I'll follow that one along. And some of the bigger the benefits I've had from them were the ones that were extremely challenging to follow.
Mhm.
There was no, with great effort, there's great reward, and they weren't little things that are just like, oh, pick that up and look at it. It wasn't something simple like that. It was something where if it didn't work, you were going to look very, very silly to a lot of people for a long time, and but had the inclination to follow it. So yeah, like I mean, and that's just scratching the iceberg for me of what intuition is. It's
Mm.
just, it do I know what it is? No, that's why I talk to people regularly about it, getting other people's take on what they think it is, what it's not. And I've had some people on the podcast say, intuition is not this, it's not that, it's boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, great, I'm happy to hear that. And I've very happily aired that, and happy to hear, and it didn't, even if it didn't resonate with me, I'm very happy to hear what other people think it is or isn't. Um, yeah, and to bring that to the viewers because someone might need to hear that at that time. And
Mm.
I definitely know I don't have the answers to it, but I'm
Mhm.
seeking information about it, not answers necessarily.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it has to do with that sense of connection. The other day, I was flying back to the States from Costa Rica, and I was in one of those real long, elongated planes. I was long, and I was sitting up in the first few seats of the main cabin, and I had to go take a pee. So I got up and I looked way down the aisle at the back of the plane and started walking back there. And they're seated six across, everyone, and it's kind of narrow, so you have to kind of raise your arms up so you don't bang into people. And I'm looking at all these human beings that they're either playing on the computer, watching a movie, sleeping, snoring, working on their computers, all this different things. And all of a sudden, I remembered that how many times we've seen a movie and the plane's going down or the ship's sinking and the captain's radioing, I have 254 souls aboard. And it's kind of like a nautical way of talking. And in that moment, that idea that came to me, and I realized that, yeah, I can imagine if you're the pilot of a plane and it's going down and you got a plane full of people back there, you really feel, I got 254 souls that are responsible. I'm responsible for their lives, and and I felt very connected to those souls. And I looked, and then I saw, of course, the flight attendants at the back, and they were kind of joking around in the back, and I felt very appreciative, and I realized that, you know, all of these years, a flight attendant to me was somebody who brought me my Coke and cookie halfway through the flight, you know, and the like. And I never listened to all that safety stuff. And then I realized, wait, these guys, they're not here to give out Cokes and cookies. They're here to take care of these 254 souls if there is one of the unimaginable things starts to happen. That's why they're here. They're here to take care of us. And I just felt this sense of love and appreciation for them. I I went back and I said to him, you know, I just realized that you guys are a lot more than, you know, giving out Cokes, that, you know, you're responsible. I wanted to thank you, you know, for taking the training and stepping up and being, you know, accepting that responsibility. And her eyes welled up, and she said that um, you rarely un- hear that from a passenger. There, that's rarely anyway. That, but that's one of those. The whole thing was just, so. I write in the guise of a letter to my friend who's concerned about this, or it's how I blog, and I write letters. And so I wrote a letter to post for my blog about that experience, the whole experience of what it was like. And surprise, surprise, you never know. I mean, you put a blog out there, and sometimes, you know, somebody says, oh, I like that. I got so much response from that blog because it just laid out very clearly, you know, that sense of connection. Um, and it's something that everybody experienced. And so, yeah, I think that the connection has something to do with it.
Mm, yeah, yeah. There's, yeah, when you are there, yeah, there was some greater connection than if you'd have said to her, "Can I have a refill of my Coke?" The connection would have been quite different.
Much different. Much different.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the I Ching? The I Ching, as it's written, pronounced I Ching.
Yes, I've heard of it, but know very, very little about it.
Well, if you don't mind, and if we have the time, I think that's something that we should chat about, because the I Ching is the manual on intuition.
Let's go.
It literally is the manual on intuition. Um, and so a lot of people, the I Ching was written, it made its first appearance around 4,000 years ago, and it's been rewritten and added to along. And its origin came out of the shamanistic traditions of ancient, you know, prior to empire China, while China was still almost prehistoric. And those shamanistic traditions, so it has its reputation as being a fortune teller, an oracle that you consult to find out what kind of a man you should marry, and a tarot card type thing. But, and it perhaps, you know, at one time it was, but in the last few centuries, it has turned into actually a bridge between your intuitive intelligence and your verbal intelligence. And if it is used in that way, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, in the rural areas of China, people don't still think of the I Ching and throwing the yarrow sticks and doing all this stuff as a way of finding out if I should get married to this guy or not. But in modern practice, it's not used in that way. And Carl Jung was very taken with the I Ching. And the words Ching, it means the classical book. Like in Taoism, we have the Tao Te Ching, which is the classical book of the way of virtue. The Ching is classical book, and I means changes. And so this is the classical book of changes, with an understanding that life constantly changes and cycles. Day turns to night, night turns to day, winter turns to summer, good times turn to bad times. And so understanding the cycling and the changing nature of the universe around you is vital to understanding your intuitive intelligence, because if you don't connect to the world around you and the energies and the forces that are playing in the world around you, it's very hard to have an intuition that is effective. And the way that it is consulted, and Carl Jung wrote, Carl Jung wrote a couple of wonderful essays where he has experimented and worked with it. The way that it is used is that you'll ask yourself a question that doesn't call for a yes or no answer. It can't be, am I going to get the job this afternoon? Can't ask that. But you ask a question like, what do I need to know about my job interview? What do I need to know? This is a question that 90% of the time you already know the answer to. It's just stuck away in your intuitive side. But if you would allow yourself to let it rise, you probably would already know the answer to it. But because of the way we live in a verbal world, it's not accessible. And so what you do is you ask that question, what do I need to know about the job interview this afternoon? And then you grab some coins and you literally shake them and throw them. And there are some mathematical calculations that you engage in. You add up the heads and the tails, and they lead to a number, and that leads to this, that, and the other thing. Eventually, it leads to a diagram of 6 lines. And then you look for that pattern in a chart, and the chart will tell you, go read chapter 23 and then read chapter 34. And wow. Then you go and you read it. Now, what happens now is that you have purposefully distracted your rational mind, which has all of your fears and worries and concerns and stuff that gets in the way of your intuition. You've distracted it by doing the math. So you've taken about 5 to 8 minutes in calculating this stuff. Then when you go and read it, there's nothing in it but it's a book of wisdoms. It has lots of little tips about living life. Like, for example, if nobody wants to listen to you right now, then probably should be quiet. Stuff like that.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah, and wait, because there will come a time when they want to listen to you, and if you use the time while they're not listening to you to polish your presentation, when they do turn and say, well, Bob, what was that you wanted to say? You're going to give them something that's going to be more effective, more efficient, and uses way less effort than trying to force it down their throat. Mm-hmm. So it's just full of stuff like that. And when you then read the selected chapters, your eyes will pick out and select the words that your intuitive intelligence needs to emphasize in order to get the message over to your verbal side. And so you wind up usually being wowed, like, I can't believe, wow, that was a great advice. But you already knew it. It was already your internal truth that was there. It just helps you rise to the surface and put it into words, so that now you can grab hold of it and you can kind of effectuate it and make more use of it.
So it's bringing it to a place or a level or a frequency or whatever that you can latch onto it with our 5 senses. Like you're
Exactly.
saying, it was already there, but
It
we
was already there.
just couldn't
Mhm.
couldn't see it, feel it, experience
Right.
it,
Mhm.
internalize it, and now a process has occurred that's brought it to the forefront, and
Right.
you were able to use your eyes to read it,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
and then you were connected,
To it.
and it those words had a different meaning at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the way that each chapter describes a different, we would talk about going with the flow, and I mentioned that Taoism was all about going with the flow.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't go with the flow if you don't understand the characteristics of the flow, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's funny because when people say going with the flow, everybody says, okay, well, you want to paddle downstream, you don't want to, paddle upstream. And they kind of leave it there. But downstream has a lot of subtleties to it. It could be a calm river, it could be white water, it could be a waterfall, it could be a flood sweeping your house away, it could be a storm, it could be a sprinkle. I mean, going downstream has a lot of characteristics to it, and each one of those has a more effective and efficient way of aligning with it than you might otherwise think. One of the great metaphors that I use all the time is if you're out in the ocean and you want to swim to shore. Well, you can panic and drown. Well, that's neither effective nor efficient, and it doesn't get you to your objective. You can decide that you're just going to swim in and damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and just swim into shore. And sometimes the tide will be helping you, and sometimes it'll be against you. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
be fighting it when it's against you and putting out even more energy. And you may get to shore, but you're going to be exhausted.
Yeah.
Or you can look and say, what is the nature of the flow here? Oh, I see. Sometimes the tide is going towards the shore and sometimes it's going against it. So if I can swim like heck when it's getting in the direction I want to go in, if I align myself with the positive flow of energy, and when it turns around and it's going against me, well, I don't want to be swept out to sea. So I got to put some energy into staying in place, but I want to conserve my energy because I don't want to fight against something that's not effective and efficient. So if I
Mm-hmm.
could just hold my spot, then wait until the tide goes in again, then swim like heck, and then wait, and then swim like heck, they'll wait. Then you will have achieved what Master Ni, my mentor, defines as mastery of life. And it was very simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
We asked him, Master Ni, why do they call you master? And he says, well, because I've mastered life. And he chuckled and walked away. And said how he was. But then we grabbed him again and we said, what does it mean to master life? And he put on a serious face. He said, now listen, because this is what I'm telling you. When you can interfere the least in the natural flow of things and yet have the greatest impact, you have begun to master life.
Interfere the least.
Interfere the least and yet have the greatest impact. All of
Interesting.
that means that you have a sense of timing, you have a sense of direction, you know when to pick the apple. If you try to pick it too early, you're going to tug and you're going to twist and it's going to be sour. If you wait too long, it drops and rots. If you pick it at the right time, it's easy and it's sweet. And so you need to develop your sense of timing. You need to develop your sense of the characteristics of the flow around you. You need to understand what the forces that are acting within you are and the forces acting within someone else and the forces that are acting in the environment around you, and kind of feel all that stuff happening and move intuitively to align yourself with it. And they say, well, how do you do that? And
Mm.
that's the beauty of it. There are Taoist practices, believe it or not, there actually is a system of learning out there in the world which teaches precisely that.
Wow.
you know,
Excellent. Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to what you were talking about just prior to that with the ocean and things like that. I've definitely had that discussion on here before. A gentleman that I've interviewed was a 4-time world life-saving Ironman champion, and he says this about the ocean currents and going with it and going again, and using his intuition to win races when he's, they do a swim leg, a running on the beach leg, and a board thing. And the swim leg was last, and he's gone into the ocean last. And the song came into his head, Go Your Own Way. And he thought, well, I love breath hold. So he's just couple of big breaths in, gone down under everything and stayed down there, and felt some currents heading out, and he's swum into them, and he's just kept following, and then he's come up a couple of breaths, back down, and the current's taking him out. Next thing, he looks up and he sees the buoy out there that's time to turn around and swim back to shore. And he's still thinking he's last. And as he swims around that, he sees them all still swimming out. Like he's actually gone. And he says the comment, and this was live on television, but the World Championship thing, and the commentators are saying, where's he gone? Like he's gone mad. He's gone off here. He's off track. And then next thing, it's like he's in front. Like what happened here? And he wins the race, going with the flow. And of course, he didn't win every race that way, but on this one particular day, following the currents. And I've talked to him about going out swimming, because we live very close to the ocean here, and and he talks about, you can go out and you've just got to read the waves. And he goes, I can teach you, I can show you how to read it, and we'll go into a spot and the current will take you out, and you'll have effort to get out, and that's where people get into trouble, because they go out in those spots. But he goes, then we're going to have to swim in a different direction, and we will have to swim hard for 50 plus feet to get across the thing. And once we get past that, then the waves will bring us back in. So there will be a time of effort, but as long as you know when to put that effort in, and you're going to put in the least amount of effort, get the biggest result, and you're not fighting it, you're not, because I have a fear of, I do go out and I body surf in the waves, but I have a fear of going out there beyond my depth. I have been swept along before when I was a child, but I was on a surfboard, and it didn't bother me. It bothered my mother and family on the beach watching me. And I wasn't going out. I was just going down this lonely beach. And I went a long way, but I just laid there, and eventually I was able to easily paddle into shore, and they all came running a long way down the beach, like not happy. But I was happy because I was on the board. Had I not been on the board, I would have been very unhappy. But so it's putting in that least amount of effort,
and having that great result.
So at the moment, I'm practicing my putting in the effort. I'm in the swimming pool a couple of days a week, doing laps, so that I'm physically attuned, so that when he takes me out and we do have to put the effort in, I've got the gas in the tank to put the effort in for the time. Like I've learned to, or you could compare it to, I've learned to meditate for 10 minutes at a time, 40 minutes at a time, an hour at a time, whatever. I can do it now, and I don't care what's going on in my mind. I can deal with that. I've put in the hard yards, and now I can do it. I know what's going to happen to a degree.
No, it is, it certainly is that you sometimes you hear of athletes, they have a fantastic game, and you say, well, they, in the zone, they feel like, it wasn't even me out there, it was like it was just happening, and they, they're operating like flawlessly, and so, I wonder how much of that is training. I mean, that's so it's so Japanese, the Japanese say, do it 100 times and you own it. And I remember one of my favorite Bruce Lee quotes is, the man who has learned 4,000 kicks does not make me afraid. It does not scare me. I am scared of the man who has practiced one kick 4,000 times.
Yes, because they'll have the muscle memory, that everything, it's just Yeah, there's just no effort, no thought required. It just can happen. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you know, when you think about it, when we're in conversation, that responding and receiving and responding is also like being in the zone, because we never think about, well, sometimes we have rehearsing thoughts, like if you're in a circle and everybody's going around sharing something, you have all these rehearsing thoughts about what you're going to say when it gets to you. And then the funny part about it is when it does get to you, you don't usually say all what you were going to rehearse anyway. You say something completely different. But generally speaking, when we're just, in a regular old conversation, talking to, our friends about this, that, and the other thing, we don't put any effort or thought into what we're going to say or how we're going to say it. It's almost like being in the zone, like we're doing it. The only difference that I would say meditation makes in that situation is that a lot of the responses and a lot of where the conversation goes and how it maps onto you is the product of a lot of conditioning that has been heaped on to you. In other words, you're working out of a database that the world has handed you and stuffed inside you, and you're working out of that database. And when you take the time to engage in a practice of any kind of internal thinking, you start to identify what is conditioning and what's authentic. And you start to, you can't make yourself, you can't just, like go on a computer and hit delete and and say, oh, that's conditioning, and delete. You can't do that, unfortunately. But you can notice it, and just by merely noticing it, noticing that conditioning, you might be stimulated to respond according to that conditioning again. You might, and again, but maybe not that time or the next time. But finally, there'll come a time when you, after two or three times, you'll notice, oh yeah, there's that thought again, or there's that thing that popped up again. And then it's a funny thing. It's like a little bratty kid who wants to bother you, and when you don't give it any energy and attention, it just goes away.
Yeah.
My wife just came back from, we were in Costa Rica, and I came back early, and she stayed 11 days with a friend of hers. And this was a very good friend who, unfortunately, on this particular occasion, I think that she lost her mother recently, and maybe, I know she's become somewhat frustrated with life. And many of her responses to my wife were confrontational and negative. And and so, whatever database or whatever thinking process that she was having really had a very unfortunate effect. My wife says, well, I think that's the last time I want to take a trip with her. I don't know what happened. I don't know why she was like that. We used to be really good friends. Um, and and that was just, something happened, and she responded, and it was very unskilled. And it just doesn't have to be that way. You can become more skilled with your responses to folks. The way that we do it in meditation is that after you pick up the basic skill, which is nothing more than noticing when your mind wanders off and returning and beginning again. And a lot of people think that you're supposed to maintain focus on the candle, or concentrate, or hold your focus on the candle. But that's not where the healing happens. The healing happens when you notice that your mind has wandered, and your brain kind of, psst, psst, hey, you said that you were going to pay attention to the candle, and you're not paying attention to the candle. Psst, psst. When that occurs, we call that waking up. And then to be able to return and begin again trains you to let a lot of stuff go, and it gets you connected with your judgmental nature. There's a lot of skill building that happens, but it happens in the noticing that your mind wandered and in the returning and beginning again. And in that process, once you have become familiar with that process, then we concentrate on actually doing meditations that cultivate different aspects of our character that act as antidotes to those things that make us unhappy. For example, greed is generally something that will make us unhappy, wanting, oh, I just got a new car and I really love the smell of my new car. And then 2 weeks later, it doesn't smell like that anymore. Now I'm not happy anymore because it doesn't smell like a new car. I mean, that's just the nature of life. I want what that person has. I want a bigger this. I want this. I want that. So what we do is we practice generosity. We cultivate generosity in our meditation, and we cultivate loving kindness. Because, Doug, if I love you as part of God's creation, as part of the great creative experiment that we're in, I don't want to take more than my portion. I don't want to take away from you because I love you. So we practice loving kindness. We practice generosity. If we're trying to find the antidote to hate, not liking, aversion, get it away from me, I don't want it around me, then we cultivate compassion. And then so there are particular meditations that actually change the physical structure of your brain to make it easier for you to feel loving kindness. And then what happens, going back to, a prior part of the conversation, when you create those mental pathways, those neural pathways in your brain, then it's just it is easier and more common that your responses are going to come out of loving kindness and generosity than otherwise. And so you walk to the back of the plane and you feel this great sense of connectedness, and you have an experience that bolsters the happiness in your life. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't cultivated those aspects. I would have just gone back and taken my pee and gone back to my desk, back to my seat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you there. So earlier I mentioned synchronicities. I'm just curious what that means to you. Do you feel that synchronicities occur much in your life very often? Are they beneficial?
I don't know what to make of it. We were driving in Philadelphia once, and somebody was talking to me, and they said, that typical thing. Wow, do you believe what happened just now? Do you know all the things that had to come together at exactly the right time, exactly the right way for that thing that just happened to happen? And I said, yeah, I get it. But you see that construction truck in front of us in traffic here? You see that big water tank on the back? Can you imagine all of the things that would have had to have happened for that water tank to be on the back of that truck right now? First of all, somebody would have had to have invented the water tank, and then the truck would have to be, so you can kind of play a game in your head about synchronicity. But there are things that have happened in my life that are pretty hard to deny. I flunked out of Boston University. Grew up in amusement parks and carnivals, and my ambition in life was to sell enough hot dogs in the summer so that I wouldn't have to work in the winter. That was my main ambition in life. After I flunked out of Boston University, I was living in a hippy dippy apartment. This one guy, John Berman, kept telling me I should be a lawyer. And I'm going, yeah, because we were arguing about Nixon and Cambodia in those days. We always are arguing politics. And so one day he shows up, he's got an envelope. I open it up, and there is a postal money order made out to the Educational Testing Service for $350, which was the entrance fee to the law school aptitude test. He'd
It's quite
gone
a bit of
out,
money
gotten a
back
job.
then.
It was a lot. He gone out, got a job, earned the money, bought the money, and then quit the job. Just so he said, you should be a lawyer. You need to go take this test. So I took the test to one law school accepted me. And John was a heroin addict, and he went he went cold turkey. That the day that I got accepted into law school, he went cold turkey, and he enrolled in community college, and he was going to be a paralegal, and I was going to be Perry Mason, and he was going to be Paul Drake. And he stayed with me and by my side and encouraged me all the way through law school, all the way through taking of the bar, all the way through, getting my first job at the DA's office, and then finally getting sworn in. And he was there when I was sworn in front of Judge Lenore Nesbitt. And then 3 days later, I came up from court, and my secretary came out and says, "Do you know John Berman?" I said, "Yeah, well, the Miami Beach police just called, and he's dead." So, I mean, that's a pretty amazing story. And then as I'm doing my stuff in Miami, we hit the mob for a lot of money. And later they hire me. Now I'm a mob lawyer. My life is going to the pits. I meet Master I Ching. He takes me under his wing. He's teaching me all about a better, more effective way of living life. And just when I'm beginning to get his learning, and just when, it's all beginning to come together for me, my mob client son gets arrested, and now he demands that I do something illegal, which I refused to do. So I wound up moving to North Carolina. And when I got to North Carolina, my life was like a blank canvas. I could rewrite it. I was a different person, and I came to a different place, and I could rewrite my life, from scratch. And it all came together at the right time, and it all came together perfectly. So when you ask me, what do I think about synchronicity? I say, how can I deny these things?
Yeah, amazing the effects they have on us, and interesting. Yeah, and I like to talk about them because I find it thought provoking for people to listen to conversations like that and realize, like, because I do view synchronicities in the way that there's a benevolent force out there that likes us and is putting things in our path, asking. Because I remember, like in my 20s, I used to have something occur, something unusual that was, like that got my attention. It would occur maybe 3 times a month apart. But, and I would sort of start to get, and maybe there was bits in between that I didn't notice. But then as the years went on, it was then like once it happened twice in a shorter span of time in between, I was starting to take notice. And then now I'm sort of at the point, not all the time, but more, where something will happen once and I'm like, oh, that's unusual, or that's my little sign that I usually see when it means I need to pay attention right now. And I guess it's that benevolent force has potentially trained me a little more, or like when we show you these little things, when these things happen, we're trying to help you. And if you are smart enough to take the help, it'll make your life more enjoyable,
Right.
and when your
Absolutely.
life's more enjoyable, it makes some other people's lives more enjoyable. It's not all about me. It's
No.
but when it makes my life better, it automatically makes other people's lives better. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, one of the things I tell my students, because I teach meditation on campus now, 2 credit course, and every semester I get 15 new students, who don't know nothing about meditation. They just know that they're anxious and stressed and they want to feel better. But I say to them, we're going to be talking about things like generosity and loving kindness and compassion and all that stuff. And I want you to know right on that we're not going to talk about that, and I'm not going to show you these techniques for cultivating that, because I want you to become a better person, although you may. And I'm not going to be teaching you this stuff so that you will make a better world, although you may. I'm teaching you these things because they are the antidotes to the things that make you unhappy. These are the things that will give you a happy life. All I care about is I want you to be happy. Now, what we have found over the past 4,000 years is that greedy, mean, hurtful, negative people generally are not very happy. But we found that people that practice generosity and loving kindness and feel connected and have a sense of their spirituality about them, that these people are generally happy. So all I want to do is, teach you to be happy. I don't think Jesus came here really to make a better world. I think he just wanted us to be happy. One of the things I see lots of folks praising God, and I always wondered. I had this question. I wonder, does God really want us? Well, first of all, I'm making this assumption that God is conscious and has thoughts and speaks in English. No, which is a little bit, but just for the sake of the conversation, would we do all this praising of God, praise Jesus, praise God, praise God. Do you think that if there was a purpose to that, that a superior being like that would need our praise? I doubt it. But they would want us to praise them because it takes a little bit of the burden off our shoulders. It says that there's somebody that's looking out for me, and it reminds me that I'm not alone. And so the practice of praising makes me a happier person. So, because I certainly don't think that, if there was a God that was all powerful and all being, that he certainly needs our praise.
Mm-hmm.
But he would like to see us be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. All right. So I've found our conversation really good. I've really enjoyed it. And I think the men listening in will definitely be able to take something away from the way you've described things, your take on things and life. The I Ching, I do have a book on, I think it is about that I've dabbled into a little. I haven't sat and read the whole thing. And potentially I've had it for a couple of years now, and it's potentially was maybe a little beyond me at the time I got it. You've got one there?
Yeah, this one here, I find for somebody that is beginning at it, it's
Mm-hmm.
out of print, but it's the Illustrated I Ching by R.L. Wing.
Mm-hmm.
This is my favorite teaching book. It's the best for learning, for starting the practice.
Yep. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And the way you described it earlier, I have seen people do that sort of thing, but yeah, I definitely know nothing about it to be able to do that. And it did remind me of people using tarot cards, etc., to intuitively bring
Right.
things out. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. And yeah, those ancient Chinese practices do. I have been taught by someone who has studied that sort of stuff, but they've brought it more into a Western thought process to help us, those of us who haven't studied for dozens of years with the Eastern methods, So those of us who aren't as in tune with that as much. So yeah. Right. So I'm going to put all of your contact details in the show notes and things like that. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to mention before we wind up?
Well, if you're interested in meditation, a lot of people always ask me, how do I get started? So I took a lot of those questions, and I wrote a little ebook, just a little 40-page primer on meditation, and it's available free. Like I say, people ask me all the time. I kept repeating the same answers over and over. I said, let me put it in a book, and and that way I can just. So if you're interested in meditation and you want to learn a little bit more about it, and find some resources where you can do some more reading or some practices, just go to my website and download the ebook, and it's a great way to get started.
Excellent. All right. We'll have that in the show notes for people to click on that. 40 pages is, they could sit down in one or two settings and read that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
easy. And follow the steps to get going with it. Is it more aligned for people who've haven't meditated before or dabbled a little, or someone who's been doing it for years would get something from it as well?
This would be for the person who walks into a gym and is and the trainer comes around and shows that person the machines and explains what they do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's at elementary level, and that's great. And it's I'm happy to, I mean, I've done a lot of meditation in the last 10 years, but I'm happy to sit and have a read of it, because I'm sure there'll be something in there that, even if I know it, or not know it, even if I've heard it before, it now may take it to another notch. And
right.
because I don't know anything. The more I learn, the less I realize I know. That's for sure. So I'm sure there'll be some great reminders in there too. And it's like, yes, I do know that I learned that years ago, and I do need to practice that more, because it'll be helpful, I'm sure. Something will jump off the page for everyone, I'm sure. Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Bob. That was excellent. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a great resource for all the men out there who are trying to improve their lives and be happier, as you say. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.